Okay, next thing we're gonna put on here is this little gizmo here. Solenoid starter button. This is gonna let us start our motorcycle by turning the key on, and when you push this, it pushes inside here and makes the connection and goes rum, 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 rum. You'll see. Welcome to Saturday Sportster. Woo! Let's get going here. So we're going to pop the cover off. Simple 3 screws. Okay, there's your stock cover. So here's your plunger. When you hit the starter button on the handlebar, it completes a circuit here and electrically pulls that. And what it does is, we'll pull this out of here and show you. See that ring? That ring comes in contact with those contacts inside there. See, this one is connected to the starter motor. And that's what makes it go. So like when I was working at the shop, if I ever had a bike come in and if you push the button and it kind of didn't work right, first thing I do to check a starter motor is I would pull this stock cover off and I'd grab an insulated screwdriver and with this still in there, I'd take my insulated screwdriver and I'd push that against it and make the starter motor go. And if it did go, then I'd pull that out of there and look at those contacts. And after it's done its job a million times, start, start, start. Those things start to get worn out, where you'll see it'll be all black on that ring. And also the contacts here and here inside the solenoid. And there is a rebuild kit available from Harley. For what a darn Harley starter motor costs, it's probably not a bad idea if you have a bad contacts on your solenoid, if that's all that's wrong with it, to put new contacts in it. But at any rate, since we are getting rid of our switch housings on our handlebar, we have to have another way to start the motorcycle, and this is going to be it. One other thing I'm going to need to do is there's your stop run switch on the handlebar. Basically that cuts power to the coil. We're going to have to take a look at the wiring diagram and figure out how we're going to connect things together so that when we turn the key on, it will make everything hot that we need to be hot, so that when we push this, it'll start the engine. There's a gasket on there. Make sure it's still in good shape. Should be able to reuse it, no problem. That just goes on like that. Comes with new screws. And they have tiny Allen heads. Guess what? I'm going to reuse the old screws. I like these better. Okay, I went ahead and hooked up the battery because we're going to work on some electrical stuff now. Our goal here today is to get rid of this mess, but we have to be able to have power for the coil, which would be the stop run switch right here. And look how these are so nicely marked. They've completely worn the paint right off them. I got my battery hooked up, I got my key switch hooked up, and I have a simple light tester that you can get at the auto parts store. Very, very handy tool for checking wiring on motorcycles. I basically have one end of it just has a clip. You can ground it to the motorcycle. This is a chassis ground right there. As long as your battery is grounded to your chassis will act like a large ground. So in order to make, and it's always a good idea anytime you use a test light, when you first hook it up, make sure it works. Because if you start testing wires with it and it's not working, then you're not going to get a good test result. First thing I want to do is I'm going to turn the key on, and there's power at our coil. And that's what the stop run switch is going to cut power to the coil. So we're going to go ahead and try the switches on the handlebar, and we're going to see if this cuts the power off. So that's not it. That must be the high-low. Our switches aren't marked very well because there's no, oh, there it is, see it? See now when you're shutting your bike off with the handlebar control switch, that basically shuts power off to the coil. So essentially what I think we're probably gonna end up doing is we're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna look at the wires that are going to this switch. And we're probably just gonna, we're gonna be unplugging both of these go into the headlight bucket, and there's some plugs. Well, we're gonna unplug them, we're gonna pull this through, and we're gonna get rid of all this stuff. And so what we're probably gonna end up doing is, if we jump those two wires that go to this switch together, that should make the coil hot anytime the key is on. So basically, you see right now, the key is off, turn the key on, now it's hot. Without that switch in play, this will stay hot until you turn the key off. So essentially, we won't have a kill switch on the handlebar. We'll be shutting the motorcycle off with the key switch. And all this is in order to get rid of these switch housings. And the other one, the last one that we're going to get rid of is going to be the high-low. But I haven't quite determined how I'm going to achieve the fact that we still want to have a high-low on the bike. So as we work along, we'll figure that out. I'm thinking maybe a toggle switch or something of that nature. Maybe wire it so that the low is on when you turn the bike on, and then you can have a switch to switch it to the high manually instead of having the switch on the handlebar. So let's go ahead, we'll move around to the other side of the bike, and we'll show you what it looks like inside of the headlight bucket. It's kind of a disaster. We'll get this stuff unplugged. We also have some other cool parts we're going to put on the bike. Obviously our headlight's removed from the mount on up here, but here's what you're going to see when you take your headlight lens out. A big mess. Well, it's not too bad. And you have a gray plug and you have a black plug. One is left, one is right. And this is for your headlight. You've got a ground, you've got a yellow, and a white. The white is high beam, yellow is low beam. Now, this is the one that has the stop run switch, because I can see there is the gray wire and the white with a black tracer. And basically what I did, I went to the Google, and if you type, this is a 2003 model, I type 2003 Sportster wiring diagram. There is an official Harley-Davidson website where you can look at the actual wiring diagram that would be found in a service manual. And so I looked on that before I started working, and I saw what color these two wires were, other than the fact that you can look there. But I did kind of trace them to see where they went and what they were doing in the harness. We can safely remove this other plug because we're not using any of this. So we're going to go ahead and unplug this one completely, and that is going to be the gray one. So we're going to unplug that, and then we're going to pull it through. Well, rather than remove all these from here, maybe these will come in handy for somebody else. Maybe we could sell them and make a buck. I don't know. But at any rate, there's a rubber plug on the back of the headlight that has a cut on it. So if we just remove that, we'll be able to get these out of here without taking the plugs off. Hopefully we don't tear anything up here. Just going to remove this rubber, and we're going to take this gray one and we're going to pull it right on through there, and then we're going to go ahead and remove it from that, and we're going to take it completely off of the motorcycle. Done with that switch housing. Don't need that anymore, not using it. Okay, now for this one, we are going to go ahead and unplug it and remove it. But what we want to do before we remove it is we want to look at our colors, and we're going to go, okay, here is the two wires right here and here. And that, once again, you can look on your diagram, and if you could see this little tiny letters, numbers on the back here, these are marked. And so that's which pinhole this we're going into if you were to completely, if you say you had to replace a plug or something, or you were doing a wiring job, if you go to the diagram, it shows you which color wire goes in which hole. So we're going to leave this right here for now so we can go ahead and try something real quick. But we've got these two wires are operating this switch. So what we want to do is we're going to try a little experiment before we decide this is exactly how we want to do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump those two together inside this plug with a temporary jumper lead. So it's going to be these two, and then we're going to go ahead and turn the key on and off and make sure we have power at the coil. And if we do, then we know that that's probably a pretty good way to get rid of the run-stop switch. Pretty simple, basic stuff. No magic going on there. Technically, really didn't even need a wiring diagram for that. You could have looked on the back and said, yep, white with a black tracer, solid gray, go up here, yada yada. So let's make up a jumper lead, and we'll go ahead and try our theory and see if it works out for us. All right, we'll just go ahead and remove this other switch. Don't need it anymore. We're pretty much done with it. We are going to keep this. We'll probably put some silicone or something over those two big holes and put this back in there to cover up that giant hole there, but for now we don't need this. And once again, boy, this would be a little easier if we could had a little more lead on here, but I guess that's how Harley decided to make it. So what we're going to do is we're going to pop that green thing out of there, so we need a pick, and that will allow us to remove those there she goes. Basically, this is just a little retainer, and now that that's removed, that will allow us to remove the two wires we want, which once again are this one and this one. So on this style plug, this is called a douche connector. And once again, boy, they sure didn't give you much room to work here on this. So I'm going to grab that one, and if you go down inside here, there's just a little tang, and you depress that, and then the wire can be pulled out like so. So we'll go ahead and take the other one out. So again, if we get our hand on there, there she goes. And then if you were reinstalling these, you just push that through that rubber hole. They're like semi-water resistant, you know, they're not waterproof. And then it just clicks into place. So here's the two wires that we're essentially going to jump together. So I have a little, these are also handy when working on motorcycles too. It's just a test lead that has two alligator clips on each end, and you can use it for temporary wiring or for testing things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hook these two together with this temporary lead. Now I'm going to turn the key on using my light tester, see if my coil's hot. And it should be, because we basically have eliminated the switch out of the system and have hooked those two wires direct to each other. Once again, pretty simple and basic stuff. Okay, connected together, keys off. No power. Oh, look at that. It works. A miracle of electricity. So if we want to double check our work, we can say, oh, look at that, it doesn't work now. Very good, perfect. So essentially, if you really thought you really did have to have a kill switch on the handlebar, you could just use one, like a dirt bike style one that clamps around the bar with a grounding, and run that to the coil, so when you ground it, it cuts power to the coil. So if you really got to have a kill switch, you could add one back on and still not have this big clunky looking thing that so many of the chopper guys, the bobber guys, the hardtail guys, and the street tracker guys, they don't want this junk on their handlebars. Yeah, get rid of it. Okay, so that's that. Nothing else needs to be done inside here other than link those two together. And then we have after we go ahead and get that done, and we'll get this rubber dealio put back in there. And then what we bought for the headlight is this really cool, actually pretty inexpensive, check that out, LED. And it's pre-wired, plug and play. All we gotta do is plug it in where the old one got disconnected, and this will fit in there just like the other headlight did. And I just thought it would be a cool little something different. And we actually bought this online, and it was pretty inexpensive. There's some of these out there that I did some research on these things, and there's one brand that I won't name, but it's very expensive, and I go, wow, I don't want to spend that much money on a LED headlight, but I do want one. So I looked around some more, and I came up with this one, and I read some reviews on it, and everybody said it worked pretty well, so I ordered one up, and I gotta say, I think it was less than like 40, 50 bucks, something's right around there. So we're gonna put that on there, that'll be pretty cool. So what I did was I went ahead and cut the ends off that used to go to the old connector for the switches, and since I must have taken my electrical connector box home a while back, all I could dig up in my toolbox was some of these spade connectors. Well, that should be okay. So I've already crimped one on there. We'll go ahead and crimp the other one, and then we'll plug them together, and I'll just put a piece of electrical tape over it because, oh, that one needs twisted. So, because basically it shouldn't have a problem inside the headlight of coming unplugged, but just a piece of electrical tape on there along with the mechanical connection of plugging the two together. And as with any crimp connector, give it a tug. That's a pretty good connection there. That's not coming apart. So now we're just going to plug these two together. Oh my goodness, that's tight. A better way to do that may have been to solder it, but I tell you what, I'm pretty confident that that's going to stay together. If I wasn't, I wouldn't want to be riding this bike around and go, no power to my coil. Oh, it's that stupid plug in the headlight. So we'll be okay with this. It's all good. I think we'll go ahead and put some electrical tape on it, just as an added precaution. But you can plainly see that I bent those over. It's not coming apart. It's fine. All right, so we have determined the easiest way to hook up the high and low beam on here. Since we're losing this rocker switch, once again, getting rid of the controls, we're losing this rocker switch. And so basically my first idea was to go ahead and put a switch and send power to the switch with the blue wire. I was thinking that the low beam would be hot with the key on, but the problem is it's jumping power from the switch to another place in the plug that we're removing. So the solution that I came up with, it's actually a pretty good solution. It's very basic, it's very simple. Went down to the AutoZone, bought a simple toggle switch. What I did was I put some wiring to it. It's got 3 positions. It's off in the middle, it's on this way, and it's on that way. So basically, blue wire will go to the middle, and then once again, we have white is high beam, yellow is low beam. So what we're gonna do, and since I used to work at Harley, I actually had some of the proper connectors that you're going to find in this particular plug, these douche style connectors, and this crimper is used for those. So I went ahead and I crimped the ends on here. Obviously not everyone's going to have those or a spare plug like I have. And so what you can do at home to do the same job is you could basically use the plug that's attached to this. And what I would do if I were you is I would cut it off, because this part's going to get mounted here like so. And then we're going to run this wire into the headlight to be able to plug it into that other corresponding connector. So what you could do is you could just cut it off here and leave everything connected, and then you could basically put some ring terminals like I've done on here and attach those 3 to this, put that through the hole in the light and plug this in same program. Rather than having to go through the trouble of doing it this way, but so there's 2 different ways you can do it to wire it. I've chose to do it this way because I had the connectors. And not only that, I think one of the reasons I chose to do it this way is because I was trying to keep this whole just in case it might be useful for something else, some other bike, whatever the case may be. And so I happen to have a ton of these kind of connectors in my toolbox from back in the day. And then it just so happened that the one I picked out of my box of parts was one of these that got cut off. So there's the 3 colors and where they go, which you could also just look here to see where they go. So I think what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and we'll show you how this all works after. So I think the next thing, oh, I forgot to say, if you look at the bottom of this visor where the headlight bolts to, there's a big giant slot from where the, I believe that was for the idiot lights. Well, so what I did was I had some scrap aluminum that was kind of thin, and so I used my shears and I cut a piece that fit, and then I drilled a hole in the center of it. And so that's what I came up with for that. Simple, effective. So basically, when you're going to ride your bike, you can have no light on, which our state doesn't have a headlight on law, but if yours does, you could just have the low beam on and switch to high beam. But you'll see when we get this hooked up how this new LED works as opposed to a stock H4 headlight. So let's go ahead and get this bolted on, and we'll run the wires through the light, and we'll get our plug assembled, and we'll plug it in, and we'll show you how that functions before we make sure everything works okay. And then we'll go ahead and install this. Oh, and look at that, we tapped those out. So that'll go right on there. All right, so we'll go ahead and get our visor, our little eyebrow chinga, bolted on here somehow. Oh, there we go. Okay. And I did run a tap through these threaded holes on here after it came back from the powder coater, just because they probably blasted it. And there shouldn't be any problem to reach that switch riding down the road to switch it. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and I think I'm gonna disconnect this for right now so it doesn't fall off on the floor and break, because that would suck. So we're gonna go ahead and run these wires through the hole on the back of the headlight. And I think we're gonna go ahead and we are gonna tighten those, but not just yet. We'll go ahead and you've got this beveled washer and then this nut that go in there. So we'll just get these attached for now. So again, we can tighten this all up at the same time. And that beveled washer actually allows you to position this correctly. So look at that. Oh, that's gonna work out just fine. We got plenty of room there. You know, we're human too. We don't always do everything perfectly. As I was kind of looking at this, I realized that the speedometer is gonna be here. And so I grabbed it off the workbench and I held it up there. It's probably gonna be maybe a little more difficult to flip this switch forward to reverse. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and loosen it up, and I'm going to turn the switch so that it goes side to side. I think it'll be easier to switch from high to low. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll continue forward on our journey here. Once again, Dooch, very easy to remove pins. Since the wires are already in here, I just left them in there until now. So we're gonna put the blue one right here in the corner. There's just a little tab in there. It'd probably be easier to see this now. When we were trying to remove those other ones, it may have been a little more difficult. You're just gonna see how it's moving that little tab. You're depressing the tab and pulling on the wire, and it comes right out. Now to put it back in, you just slide it up in there. Oh, that's the yellow one. Oops. Ha! Okay, blue. Just gonna stick it in the hole. You're gonna slide it in until you hear it click, until it comes all the way up in there. So now we'll move on to the white one. It's right here. And technically you could even hardwire this, but I figured what the heck, since we got the parts, we'll go ahead and use what we have. That one doesn't seem to be clicking, but it will. There she goes. And finally, the yellow one. It's a little bit easier when there's more wire sticking out for you to grab onto too. Okay. Used our handy dandy light tester for another job. Weren't even checking for power. Okay, so then once you get all of your pins in there, you're gonna go ahead and put this lock in there. Bam, like so. Then we're gonna plug this back in, and then we're gonna plug in our headlight. Make sure it's clicked right there. This one is missing a little piece right there, but that doesn't matter because this is the part that keeps it in there. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten these up. Then we're just gonna snug up the headlight in preparation for putting the lens in. Okay, because we're gonna aim it later. So we're just gonna snug that up enough to so it's not flopping around like it was a second ago. And now let's go ahead and plug in our light, check the operation of our switch. Once again, I'm going to hold this light because I don't want it to accidentally become unplugged and fall on the floor until we get it in there. And I'll hold it kind of away from y'all or you'll be blinded. Okay, power's on. Switch is in the middle, nothing. There's low. There's high. Off. Low. High. Beautiful. Wow. Would you look at that? We got rid of all our switches. We still got a high-low, and we're gonna have a starter too. All that other junk, just forget about it. We don't need turn signals. We don't need a horn. Who listens to a horn? Does anyone pay attention to your horn? Well, maybe they do, but whatever. Next thing we're gonna do. This is obviously the top of the light because it says DOT, SAE on it. Now we're gonna put the wires in where we look like we got some room because the plugs are on that side, so we're gonna put this one on that side. And then we're gonna see about, is this gonna fit in there with all those plugs? It's gonna be tight. After a little bit of difficulty getting the lens in because it was a little bit fatter than the stock one, we've got it in there. And we're gonna go ahead and get your trim ring on. Make sure you're orientated with the flat side in, round side out. And bottom screw towards the bottom, like so. You can see along the sides exactly how it fits once you get it going. It's kind of not an easy job, but we'll get her on there. Oh, Jiminy Christmas. There she goes. Now once you get her started, make sure it's at the bottom. It is. And then look at your rubber and you can see there's a little groove that it rides in. And then go ahead and tighten her down so the lens won't fall out. I also threw a piece of electrical tape over the plug on this light, just to be sure it stays plugged in inside there. And that looks pretty good. Okay. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and leave the top. There's a little cap that goes on here. I'm gonna wait until we can get the bike off the lift when she's done. And then there's a procedure in the workshop manual where you draw a line on the wall and then you measure so many feet. You measure up, put a line, and then you go back and put a line and you put your bike on the line. You turn your light on and the beam should be shining on the line on the wall. There'll be one for high and one for low so that we get this thing orientated so when you get out on the road, you'll be able to see where you're going and you won't be blinding the other drivers with your fancy new LED.